I don't even mind it if that were to happen to me.
Professor, hello. Can you see and hear
Hello.
us?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
I have to say I'm a new fan of yours. I found your content on TikTok. What do you think about that?
Well, I'm glad you got in there before the people who want to shut it down to take it away.
Okay. That's interesting. What do you think about the TikTok shutdown? That's kind of a good question for
That's a
you.
good way to start. But
Yeah.
Professor Wolf, watch out. He's a liberal. The man you're speaking to, he's saying he likes your videos, but he's a big business owner and a liberal. I'm just letting you know.
Okay, well, I'm suitably forewarned. I shall be terribly, terribly careful.
Okay, yes.
Um,
I'll have you know I'm stealing your labor right now.
He's
All right.
He's an open-minded
Very
one
good.
though. He is an open-minded liberal.
Yeah, so what do you actually I find the whole pursuit to shut down TikTok a little bit, or it's all kind of bad faith, in my opinion. It all seems like a bunch of BS. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I understand why it's being done. I understand that many of the things that are happening in the economy, which is what I study, have to do with a rather desperate effort of the United States to reverse history. That doesn't usually work out real well, and I don't expect it's going to work out real well this time either. But it's a way for politicians to pander, and they don't usually miss a chance to doing that if it gives them some advantage.
Right.
Professor Wolf, what would you say to people that are possibly speculating that this is an effort by big tech to basically use xenophobia to effectively shut out a market competitor that has been really dominant, a market competitor that is not obviously owned by Silicon Valley, that doesn't offer the same backdoors, even though it offers similar backdoors, I would suspect, but not the same ones that Silicon Valley tech giants would offer. People claim that this is done to erode competition.
Look, my experience over many, many years is that actions like this never have one or two causes. They are decisions that are made that meet a bunch of criteria, or if you like, respond to a variety of causes, any one of which wouldn't have been enough to make it happen, but it's the whole collection of them that make it happen. So, yeah, one of the factors going into the TikTok decision was the convenient way you can have the government favor one competitor over others. It is often arranged by those other competitors to get rid of the one that they don't like or that they can all agree on getting rid of. And so that becomes part of the story. You could see that already, or this helps you figure it out, by going after the Huawei Corporation, which produced last year and the year before things that compete with American companies. So this was a convenient way before the general onslaught against China really got going, to strike a blow, to get some support for sitting politicians from those who benefit by getting rid of Huawei. And same thing with TikTok.
It seems to me that all this kind of boogeyman threat about China harvesting our data seems kind of silly. I don't know. I'm not a technologist, but it just doesn't. I don't see how that is any bigger of a threat than anyone else who's harvesting our data. I mean, if China wanted data, they just buy it from Facebook.
Exactly. They would, like, it's probably cheaper for them to go through data brokers than to like operate servers.
It's all there already. So I don't know. It seems a little bit or a lot of it bad faith.
Are you familiar with the Resist bill? That's the Resist Act that's coming out in the aftermath of this debacle in Congress?
No, tell me about it.
So there is now or not resist, sorry, restrict. I messed it up. The Restrict Act that is being promoted There's a lot of speculation on what it could potentially do. There's vagueness surrounding it, but it's proposed legislation that was first introduced in the United States Senate on March 7th to authorize, get this, the Secretary of Commerce to review and prohibit certain transactions between persons in the United States and foreign adversaries. And the foreign adversaries list is, of course, the same villains, quote unquote, ranging from Iran to Venezuela to China and Russia, of course. And people are fearful that you can be fined up to $1 million and also with 20 years prison sentence for if they consider you to be doing something illegal, like utilizing. Again, this is vague. They claim that it's not going to hit VPNs, but using VPNs, for example, or even using TikTok. This came after. This was directed towards TikTok.
If they ban TikTok, you can go to jail for using TikTok? That's
technically.
The bill? Okay. You better start building prisons, boy.
Well, yeah. Well, that is a big.
Well,
but
the interesting. I'm glad you brought it up. The interesting thing about this is, from an economics point of view, it's kind of remarkable. I've lived all my life in the United States. I was born in Ohio and been working here all my life. And I grew up at a time when we were told in the economics courses I took in the universities where I've taught economics all my life, that an economy works best if it's private. And if the government doesn't enter in, do this, do that, regulate this, choose one company over another. We were told literally that this is a bad thing to be avoided at all costs. So I think one important thing is to recognize that all of that stuff has been thrown out the window in the last 5 or 10 years, just as if it were never spoken, as if it were never taught, even though it was the dominant ideological statement of what Western capitalism was all about. And you're now seeing, it used to be a phrase, the government should not choose winners and losers in the market. That was a kind of phrase that we were told. Well, what you're seeing at every turn is exactly the opposite. The government is choosing winners and losers, helping these industries, not those industries, saving this one, not the other one, forbidding this, allowing that. It's never stopping, and it's not a sign of confidence in your system. It's a sign of fear and retreat and danger and isolation. And now let me put on my economics hat. It's not that list that you mentioned a minute ago, Iran, Russia, China. You better get out your pencil, because that list is becoming longer and longer and longer with each passing day. It used to be Russia, China, and we would, have the usual socialist bad guys or communist bad guys. But now we have all kinds of societies. The important thing to remember is something called the BRICS, BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. We are isolating ourselves from them by pretending we are isolating them. But that's not the way it's working. The rest of the world is gathering around them, not us. And the make-believe that that's not the case is a dangerous form of self-delusion in the United States. Look, the war in Ukraine, whatever else you think of it, was supposed to be over in a short time once the sanctions got going. They were called the mother of all sanctions. They would bring Russia to its knees. Go back and look at the press in February, March, and April of last year. That's what they were predicting. None of that has happened. None of it. And why? Because it turned out that Russia, which is a weak economic system, and was before this war started, But Russia has really big and powerful friends, more of them each day. And they turned to those friends and they made a bad joke out of the mother of all sanctions, which hasn't stopped the war one iota. And adding more tanks and sending more shells isn't going to change that. These are more and more looking like the acts of people who took a really bad turn, cannot admit it, cannot face it, and keep doubling down in a way that makes the rest of the world shake their head. And more of us inside the United States scratching our head and wondering, what are you doing? What are you doing? And that's really where people like me now, that's where we find ourselves.
What kind of policy is it that you would like to see in terms of like how America responded to the war in Ukraine instead of sanctions?
Sure. I think the best way is actually to remind everybody about American history, right? At a certain point back in the 18th century, the people here in the United States decided that they were sick and tired of being a colony of Great Britain.
Mm-hmm.
So we broke away from the British Empire. We did that by means of a violent revolution. We fought a war with England, 1776. We've all learned about it in school umpteen times. We know. And an amazing thing happened. The British Empire, which at that time ruled the world, the slogan in England at that time was, "The sun never sets on the British Empire," because we've got the whole world covered, from India to Africa to, you know the story, okay? To the amazement of everybody, the British were defeated by the Americans in that Revolutionary War. But they didn't give up. In 1812, we had another war where the British Empire decided again to try to squash the new emerging economic power of the United States. 2 wars, they were defeated both times. Finally, the British got the memo. This is not going to work. You are not going to undo the history that you yourself helped to make. So what you ought to do is sit down and work out with the United States this new call. Get over your upset that your empire isn't growing anymore. Get over it. Recognize that your empire is now on the downturn and that a new power is arising, namely the United States. And they worked out a peace agreement that lasted a century. Okay, you want my answer? That's what we ought to be doing with Russia and China. Not go to one little war or not so little, one proxy war. Next, we'll have a war that isn't a proxy war. You know, we're on the edge of it anyway, almost every day. We'll do something in the South China Sea. We'll provoke one way or another, or we will be provoked. This is a dead end. It's not in our interest. It's not in their interest. We need to live with this new emerging economic power. We don't need to keep trying to squash it. It doesn't work. Every other empire, Greek, Roman, British, Persian, Ottoman, you go through them. They all had a ride up, then they plateaued, and then they went down. The last 100 years has been the American empire, especially after World War II. It was a great ride up for the U.S. It's going to be a bumpy, difficult ride down. And the sooner we face it, the better our judgments will be and the better our policies will be, because where we are going, whether it's Ukraine or banning TikTok or hounding Huawei, these are things that are going to hurt the U.S. I keep trying to explain to people when Saudi Arabia shifts its oil resources from the West to China and Russia, and this is a screaming signal. Uh-oh, even the people you thought were most dependent on you aren't anymore. And unless you're blind or blinded by some ideological reflex you ought to outgrow, you're going to be making one mistake after another, and people like you and me are going to be talking about them, even though we would wish we didn't have to.
And I
So
feel
your
like
answer is collaborative multipolarity, like leaning into that
That's
with
right.
with all of the other hegemonic powers, or at least like superpowers that are growing at a rapid pace.
the propaganda, though, that I think a lot of people consume in America is that these countries are not willing to work with us. It's them that's putting up the roadblocks.
But they are working with us. We're working with them all day, every day. I mean, we have no commerce without China.
Listen, let me give you a couple of just simple statistics. Throughout the entire anti-Chinese or China bashing or whatever you want to call it of the last 8 or 9 years, beginning at the end of Obama, right through the tariff and trade wars of Trump, and now the continuation under the neocons working with Biden. Throughout that time, the trade between the United States and China goes up every single year. There's a peculiar disconnect between, if you pardon me, the roaring bullshit from the politicians and the underlying reality that we need them. We need them to produce consumer goods. If the American people had not been able to buy cheap Chinese consumer goods over the last 30 years, they would have demanded and they would have gotten higher wages to pay what would have been the price if those things had been produced anywhere else. Capitalists in America are grateful, if they're honest, for the cheap Chinese goods that have made it possible for profits to go up without rising wages, because you could go to your neighborhood TJ Maxx store and buy inexpensive Chinese clothing, or to the other stores. You know, there is no Amazon, there is no Walmart without Chinese goods. If you plot the growth of Walmart and the growth of China, you discover something. It's the same business. That China can outproduce us on everything, but they could never have gotten into the American market unless Walmart, Target, and all the others acted eagerly to be the distributor of those Chinese goods and to make a fortune for themselves along the way. Those are the realities. The rest is make-believe. Nobody wants this war in Ukraine. Above all, the people of Ukraine who are suffering beyond all words the destruction of their society. Who's benefiting out of this? I mean,
American weapons manufacturers.
Excuse me?
American weapons manufacturers are.
Yep. Yep.
It seems like those with the least to lose and the most to gain out of this are the ones that are pushing for it and pushing for the continuation of it, whether it be Boris Johnson back when he was the prime minister going into Ukraine during the first round of peace negotiations or possible ceasefire and peace negotiation talks that were happening, organized by Turkey. Or whether it be, Ned Price and numerous other American State Department officials continuously talking about how they are not interested in peace at all. Obviously, there's an argument here about what Ukrainians want, and some will say that, the overwhelming majority of Ukrainians want to keep fighting this fight, but ultimately, we are not giving Ukrainians everything they want. It's not like we're, implementing Article 5. We're not even giving Ukrainians F-16s. We're not training them on that. We might down the line, I think, but so far these are demands that they've made that we haven't conceded to. So, I think that pushing for peace negotiations on that front with China and Russia at the other side of the table, with Ukraine and the United States of America on one side of the table, would be the quickest and most swift way to try to stop this conflict and further bloodshed from continuing.
Well, I mean, let me just expand one dimension of that point. We now have a defense budget, depending a little bit on how you look at it, in the neighborhood of $850 billion to $1 trillion. If you take a look, it's more money than the next 8 or 9 countries in the world combined spend on their military. We have just authorized an additional $100+ billion just for the war in Ukraine. Even if you believe that one motivation for the Ukraine war is the money being made by the defense industry, we already are doing more than anyone in their right mind could ask to provide them with a profitable business. Over $1 trillion. I don't even think they're that greedy. They're getting a big bundle with no opposition. Nobody opposes the defense budget. I mean, a handful of people, but it's basically trivial. The two parties that run our politics are both eager to outdo one another in supporting the defense budget. They're in very good shape. They don't need another $100 billion war on top of the gift that this one represents. So for me, I don't think it's even them. I wouldn't mind criticizing them if I thought it, but I don't see, they've made a ton of money by all the stuff we've shipped to Ukraine, and all of that will have to be replaced. They will get the money and the profit out of that. The budget is huge, and it got a tremendous boost. Look, I'm an economist, and two things have happened in the last year that strike me as downright funny. We are in a supposed war against the inflation in our country. And to that end, we have a Federal Reserve, our central bank, that has raised interest rates. And that's supposed to slow down the spending by individuals and businesses because it's too expensive to borrow money at high interest rates, et cetera, et cetera. What's the worst thing you can do to an inflation? Pour money onto it. It's like squeezing kerosene on a campfire. It flares up as a stupid thing to do. What have we just done? We have just spent an extra $100 billion on a war in Ukraine. Most of that money goes right back into the American economy because it pays for the military one way or another. And Mr. Zelensky is not stupid. He understands you better spend that money back in the United States and not in some other country, because that will be the fastest way to cut that game over, number one. The second thing we did when our banks started to collapse a couple of weeks ago was to say that the Federal Reserve is going to come in and give any bank in trouble losing deposits, they can go to the Federal Reserve and borrow brand new money to replace the deposits. Well, let me explain to you. If the deposits go from a troubled bank to an untroubled bank, that's still money circulating in our economy. If the Federal Reserve backstops banks by pumping more money in, then you've got a bank crisis leading to more money and a war leading to more money. You're not slowing down the inflation that way. You're making it worse. What's my point? It's obvious. No one discusses it in this country. No one is saying, wait a minute, we got to think about the inflationary. If we propose to help the food stamp recipients for another 6 months, the issue of inflation would be raised.
Yeah, that's a moral hazard. It's only a moral hazard as it pertains to the working poor when you're helping the working poor. It's never a moral hazard when you're helping bankers get golden parachutes in the aftermath of the 2008 financial collapse. So what you're basically, just to make it a little bit easier to understand for our audience here, am I correct in stating that we have two methods of dealing with the inflation? We have monetary policy and fiscal policy.
Right.
Fiscal policy conducted by the legislative branch, which is usually just completely powerless, with the exception of the bipartisanship that they always find when it comes down to more money for the military. And then the monetary policy is also one that you can use, and it's pretty much the only one that you can use, unfortunately, because there is no such deflationary fiscal policy that the Republicans or the Democrats will ever allow. So they're utilizing that the control over the inflation by controlling the interest rates with the express purpose of depressing wages, kicking people out of jobs, with the hopes that like inevitably people will be, this tight labor market will turn back around, and you will have a labor force that's willing and able to take less pay for the same work.
Yeah, and again, I don't mean to beat a dead horse here, but again, I'm astonished. I'm an economics professor. I'm astonished that the only way we are discussing as a nation dealing with the inflation is by raising interest rates, which will throw millions of people out of work. And everybody knows that, which will probably hurt the poorest amongst us most, the last hired, the first fired, all of that again, worsening the disparities of our racial community, of our ethnic community, of the genders, and on and on. Really, we're going to go through that? I'm a professor. I learned that there are other methods of dealing with inflation.
Can we talk about that? Can we talk about that?
Do not involve raising interest rates. I'm mystified why I live in a country where the people in charge know what I just said, and they refuse to discuss it. We have a country in which raising interest rates is considered like the thing, the only thing, and all that's left for us to discuss is how many percentage points it'll go up or down, how soon. Let me drive it home in a personal way. But people seem to like this, so I'll tell you this story. I got my PhD in economics at Yale University. At the time I got it, it was almost all men who were students. Women didn't go into economics then. They do much more now, but they didn't then. So there were 2 or 3 women in my class, and we all got to know them because there were only 2 or 3 women in my class. And one of them, who took the same courses I did, in the same classroom I did, from the same professor I did, was a woman you've gotten to know. Her name is Janet Yellen. So I know what she knows. She knows what I know. We were schoolmates. We went to the same graduate program. In that program, we learned that one of the most interesting ways to stop an inflation that has been used in many countries at many times, often with great success, and that was used August 15th, 1971, by the sitting president, Richard M. Nixon. He got on television and he said to the American people, "We've got a terrible inflation. Here's how we're going to deal with it." As of right now, as he was speaking on radio and TV, any business that raises its price, we're going to come for you, we're going to arrest you, and you're going to jail. Any union or other worker organization that pushes or tries to push the wage up, we will do the same to you. This policy is called in this country a wage price freeze. In other countries, it's called an incomes policy because it freezes the income of the employer and the income of the employee at the same time, wherever it happens to stand. That was originally put into effect for 90 days. It was extended. It brought the inflation down. It is an alternative. It has its strengths and weaknesses, just like raising interest rates, but they're different. And an honest society, trying to deal honestly with its problems would have a debate publicly about these alternatives. And by the way, there are others I could give you if you were interested. It's not the only two, there's more than two. But we live in a society that has a quick dismissal. If they even admit what I just explained to you, which is in every history book and can be verified in 10 minutes of Googling anything, there's no excuse for what's going on. Just like breezily dismissing the Ukraine war by saying the Russians and the Chinese don't offer to sit down and have a ceasefire. Both of those countries have done it. Maybe they're lying. Maybe they'd cop out once you started the process. But we're not in a very good position to call them bluffers if we haven't called the bluff. And if we're willing to sit down without conditions, why don't we say so? And I don't think you can use the argument about what the Ukrainians want, because here I'm not interested in criticizing Mr. Zelensky. But you should know, if you don't, that he has shut down opposition newspapers, opposition media, opposition politicians. He's fighting a war. Maybe you have to do that in war. But there is no way to know what the mass of the Ukrainian people feel unless you want to take the fact that somewhere between 6 and 7 million of them have left the country, and it's not that big a country, and that would not be a sign that you would want to make a big argument about, that this shows that they're in favor of fighting to the last Ukrainian, since they've made a choice not to be among those last Ukrainians that we're fighting for. So it does strike me as there's an awful lot of accumulated evidence that we're not dealing honestly and straightly with these major problems of our society. And that's usually the sign of a society that is scared shitless, if you pardon my Spanish, and therefore is functioning with a level of anxiety that is scary to watch.
Getting back to fiscal policy and monetary policy, you talked about some things that have demonstrably worked, like the Nixon price freeze. Right. For contemporary America, for contemporary American society, do you have any suggestions on fiscal policy that would be deflationary? And can we even implement these policies?
Absolutely. The first policy that would be deflationary, and it is long overdue, is raising taxes on corporations and the rich. If you want it very concrete, reverse the tax cuts that were passed in December of 2017. The biggest single economic act of recent history was that tax cut. That is what produced the $1 trillion deficits we've had ever since. We had deficits before. It's not that we didn't, but we took a quantum leap. And let me drive home. The 2017 tax cuts, benefiting mostly corporations and the rich, came at the end of a 30-year period, maybe even 40 years, of a dramatic boom in profits, of a dramatic increase in the inequality of wealth. Those were two arguments that said this was the last thing you needed to do. Corporations were rolling in money. That's why we had the greatest peacetime stock market boom in the 80s, 90s, and into the first decade of this century. They didn't need it. They shouldn't have got it. The people who deserved it were the ones who had come out on the short end of the stick over the 80s, 90s, and the first decade of this century. If you wanted to help someone, help them. But if you didn't want to help them, okay. But shoveling vast amounts of money into the hands of those who needed them least was an incredibly, if you pardon me, stupid. It was so greedy, it lopped over beyond greed into downright stupid. And then to scratch your head and say, gee, we have terrible deficits. Well, what the hell did you think you'd get with a tax cut? It's like today saying, we have a shortage of labor. Hello, you just kicked out millions of immigrants. They were doing that work. What are you surprised by the results of what you did? Were you born yesterday?
Um,
Um,
I, I wanted to ask about the. Go ahead. Sorry,
okay,
lost my
well,
train
all
of
right.
thought.
Well, I got some more questions, or at
Please.
least your opinion on one of my suggestions. I think stock buybacks used to
Right.
be considered market manipulation, and that consideration was correct in my opinion. It is market manipulation, and they used to be illegal until 1982. I think that one other immediate not a full-blown solution, but one other immediate form of legislation could come by making stock buybacks illegal again, especially at a time when corporations are very clearly only beholden to their shareholders. Even the World Economic Forum and other capitalists are talking about how they need to find a new capitalism to a stakeholder focused solution to the economic problems. I think that's one other thing that we could absolutely be considering as well.
Yes, I agree with you, but I hate to throw water on your little campfire here. So I'm going to agree with you that stock buy, but they certainly are a market manipulation. That's why they're done. Their goal is to boost the price of the stock in the market. The company, by going in and being a major buyer, has the effect of driving up the price of the stock. If you remember that members of the board of directors of many companies, high executives in many companies, are paid with stock options and other kinds of stock remuneration, then you can see they have a personal interest and a personal gain by using the company's money to drive up the price of the shares they have. But here's the water I'm going to throw a little bit. Corporations understand what we're saying. The general public, maybe not, but the people who run the larger corporations hire economists and accountants like me who explain this to them. And, maybe not the first or third or ninth time, but by the 15th time we go over it, they kind of get it. And they can keep it in mind because it's their wallet. But they have developed over the years a whole host of strategies. And if you deny them this one, and I'm in favor of it, I agree with you, I would support it. But I've been around now, and I will tell you they have dozens of other strategies that will accomplish more or less the same thing.
Oh, absolutely.
I'll give you one example just so you get the flavor. Company A big multi-billion-dollar company, and company B, another one. And they get together over golf or at the fanciest restaurant they can find, and they come to an agreement. Company A uses its profits to buy shares in company B. That's not a stock buyback. And company B uses its profits, you get the picture,
Yeah.
to buy the stock of company A. I've watched it. It's there. It's a strategy. And I could go on. And as long as we allow a tiny group of people, a board of directors, 15, 20 human beings sitting at the top of these mega corporations, as long as you give them the authority of disposing of the billions of dollars in profits, in revenues that they have at their disposal, you can't be surprised if they use it to enrich themselves. That's how the game of capitalism is organized. The rest of us are supposed to be spectators and go ooh and ah when they use the money to aggrandize, themselves or their companies. They really do have lovely shrubbery around their headquarters.
I want to say there's at a certain point, and kind of goes back to what we were talking about before, when, during a 40-year period of, huge profits, they give themselves another massive tax cut. like you said, it's stupid, but it's even worse than that. It's almost like self-defeating greed to the point where it's destabilizing society. It's going to end up eventually with their head on a pike. You know what I mean? Or their head in a fucking goddamn.
Ethan is recognizing the contradictions, Professor Wolf. That's what's going on.
Or their head in a guillotine. So, like, how is it that they're not aware? They must be aware of where they're going. And at a certain point, I just don't understand why they don't acknowledge that I can be ultra rich. And also, it's as important that we live in a stable society where people are going to come eat me.
Okay. Let me answer it by telling you a story. Since I am a graduate of the fancy schools in this country, and have all the connections that those schools create for you when you go through them. The education you get, by the way, is quite mediocre, but the connections, they are super.
Yeah,
they're just super. All right. I have therefore been at the following conversation. A group of people sitting on the boards of directors of the biggest corporations in America. Some of them talk like you just did. They say things like, well, I'll quote you, Warren Buffett will say to the public, I pay a lower rate of taxes on my billions than my secretary does on what we pay her. Remember, he said that. He got a lot of play. So he gets it. He gets it that it's stupid what they're doing. It's self-destructive what they're doing. And he appeals to the other directors like him to see what he's saying. And he's not the only one. But the problem is there's another group of directors who come right back at him and say the following. The mass of people in this country are too divided, too disorganized, and too ignorant to figure any of this out.
They say that?
They say that.
They're actually that malignant. It's just evil.
Well, it's very... Look, if you keep sticking it, I'm going to defend them now, but I'm only answering your question. I don't mean to defend them, but I am going to defend them. Because here's the way it goes. Once you get over your anger that they think like that, which I get, you're going to ask yourself, because you're a smart guy, why? I mean, people aren't born that way. Why would they think and talk like that? And here's the answer. They were Warren Buffett's in the past. They warned in their company, look, let's not go so far. Let's give the workers a decent pay. Let's, pay our taxes. Let's spend some money to make the city nicer for people or whatever. And they got shot down by the, let's call them, for lack of a better term, the conservative type, pro-business types. They got shot down, and the pro-business guys stuck it to the workers some more and evaded the taxes some more and didn't give a nickel to the community. And guess what? The profits of the company went up because there was no reaction. The local politicians didn't do anything. The people didn't get the pitchforks. They didn't march down Main Street with them. None of it. And so over time, they began to feel as though their, let's call it humane impulse, or whatever you want to call it, to be nice guys as employers was a mistake. Made them look like they were weak or in some way not as gung-ho to make a profit for the company as their fellow directors. They didn't want to take that kind of risk.
Right.
They didn't want that kind of reputation. They kind of swallowed their bad feeling. They stopped telling their wife about how they felt, because the wife would notice that if you felt that way in the past, you're not feeling that way now. I don't hear you say anything about doing good for the community. You've got me sitting on the board of the local Y or the orchestra or the local charity, but you're not coming to the meetings and you're not even asking me anymore. So what you've got is a capitalist employer class whose majority thinks they can safely ignore the mass repercussions. Nothing will happen. The Republicans and the Democrats will distract people away from what we're doing to them economically. They'll get more interested in, I don't know, immigrants or in carrying a gun, or whether transgender people can use the toilet. We don't have to worry about.
That makes sense.
That's the answer they give.
Sadly, that does make sense.
So what is the most effective mechanism of pushback in your opinion?
It's exactly what we were just talking about. Let me give you an example. As I'm speaking to you, in three countries of Europe is the answer: France, Germany, and Greece. In all of those countries, masses of people are letting the power structure there, both the political power structure and the business leadership, know that there are limits. In France, they are telling the president, Mr. Macron, you are not going to solve the fiscal troubles of France by depriving the people of 2 years of their pension. You're not going to do that. We're not going to let you. In Germany, all the railroad stations and all the airports are closed because the workers are on strike. And the issue there is the inflation. You are not going to jack up the price of oil and gas for all of us and then not change our wages. I mean, we're not going to tolerate it. And Greece, you might find, is even the most interesting. 4 weeks ago, they had a terrible train wreck, worse than the one we had in East Palestine, Ohio, but around the same time. It killed 60 young people, among other things. And they went into the streets to denounce the privatization of the rail system in their country. The government came down on them, and so now they're all against the government. This is making everybody stop and pay real close attention. The polls in France, my father was French. I speak French. I have since I've been a kid. The polls in France are about 60 to 65% supporting the people in the streets. So there is no escape from the president for him. He's in a deep, deep container of doo-doo and with very little mechanism to get out of it.
Well, what you're describing also, I have to mention this, but what you're describing is three nations that even with Greece, that have a higher rate of participation in unions in the labor force, with a stronger history of labor uprisings, and also, like, even when you consider France, for example, even if they do not have actual card-carrying union members, they have collective bargaining agreements that encompass damn near the entirety of the economy. In France, it's, I believe, 98% collective bargaining agreements.
Yes, and they're industry wide. I mean, the unions get together, the employers get together, they bargain across the table, and it covers the entire industry across the country. That's
Whereas one fact that I like to always point to in the United States of America is the union participation rate in this country is actually even lower than a country that we destroyed, we eviscerated, like Chile. Chile has a 15% union participation rate. The United States, on the other hand, has an 11% union participation rate, which is unimaginable to think about. It's unimaginable to consider, considering what we've done in Chile. So I think that factors into this a lot. You talk about democracy at work. You talk about how workplaces should implement a democratic process, even though it's authoritarian currently, and people expect that, and people think that that's normal. I think that that is the main mechanism of pushback, is
also,
building out.
I want to ask, maybe this is why. I'm just wondering, why are Americans so docile?
Yes. In many ways, that's what we've been talking about, even if it hasn't been explicitly in so many words. And the whole world wonders about it. I wonder about it, but I can assure you, I go to Europe fairly often. I give talks, papers at university conferences and crap like that. And that's the question I'm asked. What is it You know, the French have the yellow vests a few years ago. You guys may remember before the pandemic hit, this amazing outpouring of opposition among the French people to the rising cost of gas and electric bills. And so yeah, I mean, what is it about the American people? They grumble. You know what they say at the bar at night. You've been there. You know what they say over the dinner table. You know they have feelings about this. You know they're angry about what the price of eggs going up the 2 to 3 times over the last 6, 8 months. Everybody knows you can't. I mean, and inflation is a phenomena that pokes you in the nose, every day. So people know, but they have this sense somehow in America that it is either impossible or unwise to get together with other people, enjoy the benefit of having numbers, and beginning to actually act democratically, to say that we, the people, have a right to be heard, to have a right to shape the policies that we live under. They say it, but they don't really believe it. And somehow in there, I think, lies the explanation for this docility, for this hesitance to get out there and do stuff. It's very discouraging. And I want to go back to the story I told you about the board of directors I meet with. When you have docility like that, you are encouraging the corporate board of directors to think that they can get away with virtually anything. Amazon is in the process, in case you didn't hear it, of doing away with the free delivery. They got what they wanted.
There's going to be blood in the streets from that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they see profit. They're going to start changing. They've issued some indications. Only if you buy so much will you get. If you don't buy that much, you don't get it for free. And you might get it sooner, then the other guy's going to get it later. They're beginning to play the game because they don't think they have any opposition they have to fear.
Part of me, I wonder, I imagine if you were to get, the majority of people interacting and caring together about one cause. In my mind, imagining Americans doing that is almost hard to believe because the different tribes, the two different tribes here in America, are so opposed, and the propaganda on either side is so compelling. It's like if you have a bunch of, let's say, liberals in the street protesting inflation and price gouging and all this, it would be so easy for Fox News and their saddle and all their cronies to vilify them in whatever way they wanted, right? To prevent the other half from participating. And I feel like there's no critical mass eventually where it's because you need both people to come together on a cause to get anything done, I feel like, in a meaningful way, to have enough people. I wonder if that's why.
There are plenty of issues. There are plenty of issues where the American public actually unite on across the board. Abortion being one of the greatest examples of this, like the protection of abortion rights being one of the best examples of this. And yet, obviously, the Democratic Party doesn't do enough to protect that, and the Republican Party very openly works to undermine it, and not even through the legislative body, but through state legislatures and the court process and the court system.
If a conservative who, let's say, even supports that privately, I think they would be afraid of being perceived as a traitor if they went out into the streets or something like that to support the cause.
I think that they have weaponized wedge issues very effectively in the United States of America as a mechanism to divide the working class. The working class has no class consciousness in this country. Mm-hmm. Historically, they haven't had class consciousness in the country. Even in the Eugene Debs era, there were still plenty of people, like the Steinbeck quote that comes to mind immediately is about how socialism will never work in the United States of America because the workers do not see themselves as an exploited proletariat, but temporarily embarrassed millionaires. I mean, that's paraphrased and maybe falsely attributed to this topic, but it doesn't matter. My point is that attitude still exists. American exceptionalism is built into people's minds. Americans still believe a false meritocracy that doesn't exist. These are all these are all ideas that the bourgeois state and its institutions have basically reinforced through even neoliberal institutions like where Professor Wolff graduated from, Yale, all the way down to, you know, our regular education and what people are taught in schools from, you know, pre-K through 12. So that's it. It's very successful. This is what happens when you have a country that has no class consciousness and capitalists of one. And it makes sense. We are the labor aristocracy. We are living in the imperial core. We do benefit from the global exploitation of the third world, the exploitation of the global south. And we kind of recognize that. We recognize that the cheap goods and commodities that we consume are, you know, sedating the masses, and people are relatively comfortable. That's why no one fucking rises up when you see a 700% increase in profits for an egg company. The California egg company that just reported like insane record-shattering profits and they did that because egg prices were increased. There's too much corporate consolidation. They have all the power, and just like Professor Wolff pointed out, Amazon is doing that single-handedly, monopolizing e-commerce, and then slowly but surely increasing prices. And doing whatever the fuck they can, and there's no way to fight back against it.
So I don't know if you have an opinion about that, or it's probably a whole lot of stuff, you know. But it is concerning. I mean,
yeah. I mean, I have to get off. I have other things.
Right.
I did want to end my part of this on a more positive note, because I agree with everything you've said. I really do. But I want to again point out, these things can change. In France, it was believed that their working class was divided beyond all repair, basically divided as follows: a vast group of people in the middle, then an extreme right wing associated with the Le Pen family that you may have heard about, father and now the daughter as a leader of a far right-wing anti-immigration thing. And then a fractured left with a communist party, a socialist party, a green party, and all the rest. And that they could not get together. The union, there are 8 national union federations in France. We have one, the AFL-CIO, they have 8, and they've never been able to agree on anything. In the last 5 years, all of that has changed. Here's what's happened. In the last election that Mr. Macron won and that Le Pen came in second, a very, very close third, 1 or 2 percentage points less, was a unified left in which the communists, socialists, Greens, and 3 or 4 other parties all got together. Unheard of. And they were, as I say, 2-3 percentage points less than Mr. Macron. That's all. The division in France is very dangerous for the government in power because the left was unified. In the demonstrations that have involved millions of people over the last 2 weeks and are scheduled to continue next week again, the 8 different trade unions who have been unable to agree on anything else are all agreed. They are all together leading this movement. It's led by the labor unions united. France has never seen this before. And I believe it shows the wisdom of a famous remark made by a great leader years ago. Here's how it goes. For many decades, nothing seems to happen. And then in a few weeks, decades happen.
Who said that, Professor Wolff?
The man's name was Vladimir, but not Zelensky. You can think about who it might be, and you'll guess right.
Brilliant guy. He's really good, really smart guy.
I know you have to go, but thank you so much for calling. It was incredible talking to you. You're so great. Maybe you'd be open to coming back again sometime. That would be awesome.
Absolutely. I like your program. I like the style and the way you do things.
Oh, thank you
And
very much.
you don't beat around the bush, which I really appreciate because I live in a country where beating around that bush seems to become a
I only
necessary
beat one
career.
bush, Professor, and it ain't the one we
I
talk
won't
about.
go there.
All right.
go there.
But I do want to say
Jordan Peterson's grandmother's bush.
I do want to say you have a YouTube channel, Democracy at Work, or you're associated with it, and somehow you can subscribe on YouTube. I'm going to put the link in the description. You guys are going to be greatly benefited by following Professor Wolff on TikTok, on YouTube. We'll put all the links in the description. Democracy at Work on across social media. We'll put them all in there. But go, please support and follow this brilliant man who's going to be calling in again soon, hopefully.
We're going to get Ethan to read State and Revolution.
And then we'll talk about that. Very good. All right,
Bye.
gentlemen. Take
Thank
care.
you again.
Thank you so much.